Alright chaps, welcome back to the channel. It's a big week in the Championship. We've got a full fixture list coming up in midweek. All of those games will be previewed in today's video. Also going to be discussing all the matches that took place over the weekend as well. Get your verdict on those games in the comments down below. Drop your score predictions down there as well. But without any further ado, let's just jump in. Starting out at St Andrews for Birmingham up against Millwall, and it was a massive win for Birmingham over the weekend. They really put Pompey to the sword, beat them 4-0, but honestly could have had even more goals in that game. They created 7 big chances, had 19 shots. Obviously Stansfield had his penalty saved as well. So yeah, really good stuff there from Birmingham, particularly because one of their biggest issues so far this season probably has related to chance creation and actually taking those chances when they get into the final third. So to put 4 past Pompey, that should give them a real boost going into these next 2 matches, albeit I think Millwall will be a sterner test for them in this match. Millwall, bit frustrating, no doubt, not to win over the weekend, considering that last minute equaliser to Oxford. Still means they are unbeaten in 5 though, and I never like backing against Millwall on the road. Since Alex Neil's come in as Millwall boss back in December last year, they've only lost 6 of their last 18 away matches, which is some record on the road. I could see both sides scoring in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends level, you know. 3 of the last 5 head-to-head matches between these two sides have ended as draws, so that's how we'll kick off the video. I'll go for a 1-1er between those two. Next up to Ashton Gate for Bristol City up against Blackburn, and it's safe to say that the weekend was one to forget for Bristol City fans. They were absolutely annihilated by Stoke, and pretty much everything that could have gone wrong for them in that game ended up going wrong. Defensively, they just capitulated. Vitek, who I think has been really good for Bristol City so far this season, had a bit of a stinker, especially with that second goal. Struber will be looking for a reaction from his players in this game. Now, to be fair to Struber and Bristol City, when they have put in poor performances this season, they've always tended to bounce back in the next game. Like when they were pretty poor at home against Oxford earlier in the season, they followed it up with a really good performance away at North End. When they lost against QPR, they followed it up immediately with 3 wins on the bounce. So Bristol City don't strike me as one of those clubs that are going to go into a massive rut because of that game against Stoke. I think maybe we could just chalk that one down to circumstance. A few players are injured at the moment and just having one of those off days. With that being said, this isn't a straightforward match. Blackburn have won their last 2 matches and got a fantastic result over the weekend against Leicester. Johnson's in fine form at the moment. He's now got 3 in his last 2. Took his brace really well over the weekend. And after it all seemed a bit doom and gloom at Blackburn a couple of weeks ago, back-to-back wins, and suddenly they're looking up the league table now. Score prediction for me in this one, I think there's just got to be some sort of a reaction from Bristol City here, but I do think Blackburn gets something from this one. Score prediction, I'll go for a draw. 1-1 between those two. Next up to the Valley for Charlton up against West Brom. Both sides coming off the back of draws over the weekend. Charlton had that draw with Swansea. Big moment for Charlie Hellman to get off the mark. His first goal for Charlton. I think the longer that went on for his goalless streak, the more pressure that builds on him, even despite him contributing in other ways to Charlton during the season so far. At the end of the day, a striker is always going to get judged on goals, so maybe he could go on a bit of a run from this point onwards. Going up against the West Brom side, who have been such a frustrating watch recently. A goalless draw against Sheffield Wednesday over the weekend, and I mean, that is their major issue at the moment. They're averaging less than a goal per game. Their creative numbers are currently amongst the worst in the Championship, and with the personnel they've got, I think they absolutely should be scoring more goals. Now, they're a tricky one to judge because someone like an Isaac Price or Mikey Johnson can just pick the ball up on the edge of the box and bang it into the top corner. But with these two sides coming up against each other in midweek, I do have a bit more faith in Charlton, especially with their record at home. Score prediction in this one, I'm going to go 1-0 Charlton, but the first goal in that game does feel very big. Next up to Pride Park for Derby up against Hull. 2 of the most informed sides in the Championship going up against each other in this one. Derby, who have now won their last 3. Brilliant result for them on the road away at Sheff Utd. Colton Morris with a hat-trick in that game, and what a signing he's proven to be for the Rams so far this season. Going up against a Hull side who are currently on the longest unbeaten streak in the Championship now. 6 games unbeaten for Hull, and a great win for them on the road away at Norwich. I did think they rode their luck at points of that game, to be fair, especially in the first half where Norwich just had a flurry of great chances but just couldn't hit a barn door. And I think against better opposition, Hull probably get punished for that sort of first half showing and how many chances they actually let up. But ultimately, they were the team that took their chances when they came along. And Joe Geldhart, with another goal, he's in terrific form at the moment, isn't he? I just have a feeling, though, that with the way things have changed at Derby recently, how good their home form's been of late as well, I just have a sneaky feeling that Derby could just shade this one. Score prediction, I'm going to go 2-1 Derby in that game. Don't like backing against Hull at the moment, but just have a sneaky feeling their unbeaten run could come to an end in midweek. Next then to Ipswich up against Watford. Two sides coming off the back of cracking results over the weekend. Ipswich really putting QPR to the sword, putting 4 goals past them. It was Marcelino Nunes with 2 clever set pieces and George Hurst with a brace in that game as well. Did see that Hurst went off with an injury in the second half, but if that one was just cramp, then could be back available for this one against Watford, and his presence will be quite important up against a Watford side who got a cracking win themselves, putting 3 goals past Middlesbrough. And you've got to say, on paper, that is a really exciting team that Watford have got at the moment, with Doumbia and Kermagard causing all sorts of problems up front. You've got Imran Loser in the middle pulling the strings, definitely one of the best players in the Championship right now, and then out wide options like Vata and Barr, who are really exciting as well. The main thing for Watford now, I think, will be to try and get a bit more consistency away from home. It feels like they've cracked the formula at Vicarage Road with 4 consecutive wins at home. Away from home, though, they're still chasing their first win of the season. That'll be the big difference for me if Watford will be able to get over the line this season and into the top 6. Score prediction for this game, I can definitely see both teams scoring. I think they've got a bunch of quality in the final third, each of them. Could see a 2-1 either way, but do you know what? I'm going to give Watford something here. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends level. I'll go for a 1-1 draw between those two. Or do I think there could be a few more goals? Scratch that, we'll go for a 2-2er between those. Next then to the King Powerful, Leicester up against Middlesbrough. Both sides coming off the back of losses over the weekend, although I do think there is much more cause for concern over Leicester right now. It's 3 consecutive losses for Marty Cifuentes' side, who just aren't looking like a good team at the moment. Barring the odd bit of individual quality, they're not scoring a great deal of goals at the moment, which I think is the real concern. Defensively, they look vulnerable on multiple occasions against Blackburn over the weekend. And while Middlesbrough, I don't think have been at their firing best recently, obviously off the pace themselves over the weekend as they lost 3-0 away to Watford, I do think Borough probably stand a better chance of bouncing back in this game. While Borough themselves haven't been scoring a great deal of goals recently, barring that game against Watford, they've still looked pretty tight defensively. Edwards is going to want a reaction from his players after the weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if this is 4 consecutive defeats for Leicester, you know. Score prediction, I'm going to go for a grinding 1-0 away win for Borough there, which would seriously put Cifuentes under pressure. Next then to Oxford up against Stoke. A good point for Oxford, all things considered. Got that last-minute equaliser thanks to Placheta. They took both their goals really well in that game against Millwall, to be fair. Brannigan with a terrific strike in the first half. But this game against Stoke is going to be just as much of a test as that one against Millwall was over the weekend. Stoke, who are coming off the back of probably their best performance of the season so far, they absolutely annihilated Bristol City. Just the perfect performance from Mark Robins' side. They put 5 goals past them. Obama was absolutely unplayable. And that's probably been the biggest frustration with Stoke so far this season, that while they have been creating a decent amount of chances, prior to that game against Bristol City, they hadn't really been hitting the back of the net on a regular basis, but still keep chipping away at the points and are really high in the table because they've got the best defensive record in the league. Back to front, I do think Stoke are a better team than Oxford. Obviously, that is reflected in the league table right now, but you can't overlook this Oxford side, especially at home. They've only lost 1 of their last 5 home matches. They've been scoring more goals in recent weeks as well, and it would be typical of the Championship for Stoke to put in that sort of performance over the weekend and then come to Oxford in midweek and lose 1-0 or something like that. But I do think Stoke will get something from this game. I will go for a draw. I'll go for a 1-1 between those two. Next then to Coventry up against Sheffield United. Coventry obviously losing their first game of the season on Friday night away at Wrexham, and there were a few people who called that, to be fair. I think in the weeks leading up to that game, there have been a few more signs of a few cracks there at Cov, just in terms of some of the chances they've been giving away to the opposition and things like that. With that being said, I think this is a really good game for them to bounce back in, going up against a Sheffield United side who mentally looks so fragile at the moment. Defensively, have got gaps all over the pitch. They obviously lost 3-1 against Derby over the weekend. That's now 6 goals Sheffield United have conceded across their last 2 matches, and they're now going up against the division's top scorers. To me, I think this one is screaming out as a Coventry win. Although I do think Sheffield United could be good for a goal, or maybe 2 in this one. One of their brighter sparks in recent weeks has been Callum O'Hare, who's obviously back at his former stomping ground here. Sure, he'll be fired up for this game. I'm just struggling to see past the Coventry win, though, all things considered. They're going to want to bounce back after the Wrexham loss. Score prediction for me, I'm going to go 3-1 Coventry in that game. Next then to Deep Dell for Preston up against Swansea. Big win for North End over the weekend, going away to Southampton, beating them 2-0 with all the injuries we've got at the moment. That's a really impressive result, and ultimately that was our biggest downfall last season. We were really solid at home under Hecky last season, but away from home, more often than not, we ended up just giving games away to the opposition. I feel like there has really been this mentality switch within the squad this season. At home against Swansea in this game, I would make North End the favourites. Swansea, though, got a good point, I thought, over the weekend, 1-1 against Charlton. The Valley isn't an easy place to go to, and Adam Eder took his goal really well in that game. Swansea are continuing to chip away at the points, aren't they? But the underlying numbers still suggest that there is a bit of cause for concern there. In terms of chance creation, Swansea have been statistically the weakest side in the league so far this season. So while Adam Eder or Zander Potnik can pull a goal out of nowhere, long term those sorts of numbers can catch up with you if you don't make the adequate tweaks. A draw in this game wouldn't surprise me. It feels quite low scoring. I'm just going to give the edge to North End though, being at home. Score prediction in that one, I'll go 1-0. Preston. Next then to Loftus Road for QPR up against Southampton, and both sides could really do with a result in this game. QPR have lost back-to-back matches, Southampton have lost 3 on the bounce. Southampton have got QPR away midweek, and then they play Sheffield Wednesday at home on the Saturday. With the club currently sat 21st in the Championship and just hovering over the relegation zone, would it be fair to say they're in crisis mode right now? Thought they were poor over the weekend against North End. I think there have been games this season where Southampton have just got a little bit unlucky in where their finishing has let them down and they've absolutely dominated. But over the weekend, that wasn't really the case. They didn't offer a great deal going forward in that game, which does concern me going into this one against QPR. Now, QPR themselves haven't been firing on all cylinders recently. They were in the game at half-time against Ipswich, but second half of that one, it just completely got away from them. And defensively, defending crosses and balls coming into the box does look like a bit of a vulnerability for QPR at the moment. But if I had to side with either of them to bounce back in this game, I'm probably giving the edge to QPR. You know, score prediction, I'm going to go 2-1 QPR in that game. Next then to Hillsborough for Sheffield Wednesday up against Norwich. A solid point for Wednesday on the road last time away at West Brom. And I do feel like Hillsborough will be a tougher place to go now the fans are back in there than it was a few weeks ago when obviously all the fans were boycotting. Wednesday have only picked up 1 point at home so far this season, but I would fancy them over these next few weeks and months to chip away at some of those points at home, especially in a game like this against the most out of form side in the Championship. Norwich have now lost their last 6 consecutive matches, and I mean, it's tough to see any manager in the Championship surviving a run of 6 consecutive losses, but as of recording, Liam Manning is still in there. And over the weekend against Hull was such a bizarre game of football because genuinely going off the chances Norwich created in that first half could have easily been 3 or 4-0 up going into half time. But then Hull hit them with that sucker punch right at the start of the second half, and from that point onwards, they're fighting a losing battle. Mentally, they look really weak at the moment, Norwich. Despite getting into some good positions in most of the matches they're playing at the moment, their finishing has been so wayward. Up against a Wednesday side who have only won 1 so far this season, but aren't conceding a great deal of goals at the moment. I would not be surprised whatsoever if this is another sort of game where Norwich have about 20 shots, they hit both posts and the crossbar, and Sheff Wednesday end up winning it 1-0 or something like that. With the crowds back in at Hillsborough, I'm going to say Sheff Wednesday win this one 1-0. It's just tough to back any sort of Norwich result right now with the form they're on. And then to finish off this midweek batch of games, we're going to Fratton Park for Portsmouth up against Wrexham. For Pompey, it's now 3 consecutive losses and quite a few causes for concern concern with that performance away at Birmingham, I thought, over the weekend, where honestly the 4-0 scoreline probably flattered Pompey, if anything. Could have been 5 or 6 with some of the chances Blues had in that game. And this one against Wrexham isn't the easiest to bounce back in. Attacking wise, it's been obvious that Pompey have been missing some key personnel this season. They're not hitting the back of the net as regularly as they were last season. They are currently amongst the division's lowest scorers. Although I do think it is worth pointing out that Portsmouth are 4 points better off right now than they were this time last season. So I know it's easy to buy into all the doom and gloom when you're, on a 3-game losing streak, but there is context to be taken into consideration with that. And when everyone is fully fit, I think Pompey do have a good competitive side for this level. However, this is not an easy game. Up against a Wrexham side who do have more goals in them right now than Portsmouth, coming off the back of a fantastic result and performance over the weekend, beating Coventry, the first side to do so this season. Kiefer Moore with a perfect hat-trick in that game. This is another one of those games where I could just see a player like Kiefer Moore causing absolute havoc. Pompey, I think, probably need the win more than Wrexham right now, but on the balance of probabilities, I think Wrexham gets something on the road here. Score prediction, I'm going to go 2-1 Wrexham in that game. But there you guys have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure to get your score predictions in the comments down below, and any other comments from the weekend, get them in the comments as well. Apart from that though guys, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.